Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very different session today. And this is a discussion on timing your leadership. I am glad to have so many people in the room right now for a topic such as this. And it was a bit of a trap to see if people really are looking for some low hanging, cliche topics revolving around leadership, or are we ready to go deeper? And why I say cliche is because things like motivation, things like managing your time, we've been through a lot of times. And if you're facing challenges still in those spaces, it's primarily because of our habits, or our limited beliefs. So that's going to take a long time for us to get out of. And there is, of course, a way to do that too. But when you talk about strategy, a lot of us believe that we need to get into strategy or a discussion related to strategy only if I am the head of a strategy department somewhere, if I am responsible for defining the strategy of an organization. So let us see, what do we think here in this room? I'm going to put out a poll for you, and I want you to very honestly and quickly tell me if you are in a strategy role in your organization. Is that a yes or a no? I'm going to give you a few more seconds. So I'm ending the poll here, and here are the results. So 77% of us are actually in a strategy role, and 23% of us are not in a strategy role. So to this 23%, I want to say that you are in fact in a strategy role as well, for as long as you take decisions in your work environment. Whenever there is any decision making involved, there is a strategy that goes behind it. So let us drop the whole thought process of limiting what we're going to gather as information or knowledge from this session for only strategic roles. And let us understand that strategy is nothing but our way of making decisions. On an average, a leader, or anybody who's in a work environment makes about 300 different decisions, some personal and some related to work. So, are we doing that without any strategy? Absolutely not. Sometimes we consciously know how to go through that process, and sometimes we just indulge in our own habitual way of making decisions. So, let us drop this notion that strategy is to do with the role. Strategy is to do with your thinking process, which leads to the decisions that you make. And that is how important it is for us to understand what role does timing play in leadership. So I'm going to just share the YouTube live link on the chat window in case there are people who are trying to log in and not able to. You can share this link with them and they can see us live on YouTube. All right. So, time to dive into our mind map, but this is what we must do before we get there. I would want you to indulge in the next 1 hour to go into areas in your work experience where you've taken some wrong decisions, right? And that's a part of life. No matter how wise we are, how experienced we are, we've all made good and bad decisions. So I want us to go back to some of those not so good decisions. Now, the result of it might not be devastating, but if you felt like it was a decision that wasn't made so well, I want you to make a bullet point that can remind you of that particular episode. So you don't have to write the whole story, but just in a bullet point or a few bullets of areas or instances in the past where you goofed up a bit with decision making. And you will be able to really value this session even more if you can get there. So allow me to share my screen at this point and
I can't
proceed to.
share it right now. This is Rakesh here.
Yeah, go ahead, please, Rakesh.
I should share like what went wrong or
Yeah, why
wait.
not? Why not? Let's do that.
So
Very
actually,
fun.
making wrong decisions is part of the learning process, I believe. So there are a few key decisions which went wrong recently with me. So I would like to share that. So I was working with a very big client on a closure of a big BD deal where we would be engaged as a volume partner for executing their services. Okay.
Hmm.
So I had been working for the last 6 months with this client, engaging with them and successfully trying to build our place in their ecosystem. So along with that, I knew that there was a preferential client, a preferential consultant whom the client prefers to work with. So
Hmm.
as a strategy, what I had decided is that I will also make space for the preferential consultant so that we will split the portfolio 50-50.
Hmm.
Okay. Because I was actually breaking into their strong areas. So I had to keep space for them. Otherwise, I would have been got kicked out.
Hmm.
Now, what happened is the preferential consultant also happened to be a friend of mine. And before closing the deal, I had a call with him and I told him ki let's not break the price for each other and let's, because the client is anyways trying to split the portfolio,
Hmm.
let's be uh, at a at a very nearby distance on the pricing mechanism, which
Hmm.
I felt very deeply hurt after I had this conversation, because I felt it could lead to cartelization. He could have complained to the client and he could have really have me kicked out from the entire deal.
Hmm.
So this was a very big decision which went against me, and my heart, my conscience, everything started hurting, and 2 nights I couldn't sleep.
Hmm.
But then this Monday, I openly discussed with the client that I had a word with the preferential consultant, and I honestly want to confess that this is a problem area. I thought that I shouldn't have done it, but I am informing you because I want to be very transparent with you.
Superb.
So he accepted my take, and without taking any offense, he decided that both of us will get equal amount of work, which we had planned initially.
Lovely. So honesty paid off.
Yes. So this is one decision which went wrong, and then I could work towards my favor, bring it in back in my favor. Like,
Awesome. I think when nothing works, being vulnerable and honest does, right? You
yeah.
can just drop your guards and just be out with the intent, and that's always appreciated.
And I
So
had
great
the guts
story.
to discuss with my CEO also that this is a wrong discussion which I led into. So kindly forgive me. I told him that.
Right. So, and courage. So, courage is the key here, right, Rakesh? I'm glad that you have a good leader in your CEO who can appreciate this courage and not look at it as any sign of weakness, which it isn't. It takes a lot of courage to honestly spell out the mistakes that you make because it's only human that we do that. Right. So, interestingly, what we're going to go deeper into in this session is also about mistakes and what are the ways in which we should learn from our mistakes. So, we often hear this from people that, either you're successful or you're learning. But is there a way or to which you can learn, a way that can be followed, a certain process that can consciously be culled out to know how to learn from mistakes is something that we will go a little deeper into in today's session as well. So thank you for that sharing, Rakesh. Let's get into our mind map now. And the focus here is going to be on timing your leadership. What does that mean, first of all? What do you mean by timing your leadership? So I'm sure you all would agree that this current pandemic that we are facing is such an amazing situation to learn from in so many ways. Right? This is not just another crisis, but a crisis that no one was prepared for. Not a person, not an organization, not a country was prepared for. And when you have to deal with things which are unprecedented, when you have to deal with things which are beyond just crisis, where you can't just pick a book and learn some hacks and implement them immediately, is when you realize the importance of timing your decisions. The way you are deciding on work from home policy, the way you're deciding on cutting down on remuneration or letting go of people, the reasons for those strategies, the timing of those actions is going to go a long, long way in people's loyalty and trust in you as a leader and in the entire organization. So, timing is the critical link that connects a strategy to an execution. You can have a great strategy and you can have someone who can execute it really well. But if they don't go on the floor at the right time, it will lead to a disaster or sometimes even resistance. Right. So there are four possible scenarios when you talk about timing your leadership decisions. First, of course, is wrong action taken at the wrong time. Now, you remember the hurricane that hit New Orleans a few years back, and New Orleans, as geographically, it is designed in a way that it has swamplands all around it. There are lakes on the north and the south side of it, so the city is pretty much like a bowl, and which means it's a low-lying area, right? And when you have a low-lying area like that, as a part of the natural existence that it has, you know that it is bound to be hit by hurricanes. You don't have to wait for a disaster to happen for you to get the pieces together and be prepared for such an episode. But unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. And the mayor at that time, Najin, did not prepare his team or didn't have the logistics in place, which led to more than 1,500 lives wasted because they were taking last minute decisions almost at the 11th hour, and everything was totally out of anybody's control. When things like this happen, when you have lives at stake, the leader is the only person responsible for such fiascos, and you can't really latch on to any other excuse or association or agency around you who should have done a better job than you had to as a mayor of the state. And that for me is a classic example of wrong actions at wrong time, because the actions that mayor took that time to rescue lives was to give them an option to evacuate New Orleans and move to nearby states, instead of making it mandatory at least a week, 10 days before they had forecasted a hurricane. In fact, it was just a day before the hurricane actually hit the state that the mayor finally took away that option from his people and said that now this is a mandatory evacuation. Now, what happens when you do an evacuation of a whole state just a day before a hurricane like that has to hit? You can't do much. So he arranged for some place where people were supposed to be housed, where there was no food. There weren't too many facilities to take care of anybody. He pretty much told people that you've got to carry your own food, make sure it is non-perishable, make sure you have your clothes, make sure you have enough to survive, because we don't have any resources. As much as he was relying on some churches around to help, and he was sending out faxes to them so that they could come to their rescue, the issue here was that nobody was sitting next to the fax machine anymore. It is just a day before the forecast of a hurricane, so everyone had already long gone. In fact, the churches there did a much better job with evacuation within their control than what the state government could do. And that, for me, is an example of what wrong actions can do at a wrong time. And when you lead with wrong actions at a wrong time, you're only looking at a disaster to happen. But what if the action is right, but the time is wrong, right? You intend well, but it is not the right time to show that intention. And that's when you might face a lot of resistance, which is a classic situation in a change environment, right? So when you are trying to change things in the organization, whether it is a function of some acquisition that's happening, or it is a function of some new management team that you're trying to incorporate, getting a CEO from the outside or some other senior management executive from the outside, you know that it's going to create a little turbulence in the preset environment of your organization, and you will have to deal with that resistance. And that's when you rush to a few books or some knowledge guru on change management, and you want to figure out how change management is dealt with. Let's do a workshop on change management and get our people ready. But it is way before that that you need to know how will you handle resistance if you are going to bring in a change. Better still, see if you can time it better. Instead of trying to deal with that change in a better way, can you time that action in a better way? Can you bring in the right action at the right time instead of a wrong time? So what are the ways for us to know what is the right time and a wrong time? How do I deal with resistance if I face it and I think that this makes a lot of sense and I'm leading the show and I just go ahead with that, but I see resistance? Now that's where I want you to ponder over these pointers, and please put them down in your notebook if you have one in front of you. These are the 5 areas that we need to compulsively look at whenever we are developing a strategy where there is some right action to be taken with the intent to grow, but you haven't been careful about the timing. You need to go deeper into these 5 areas. The first one is understanding. Now, understanding is when leaders have a clear understanding of the situation. They have a clear grasp on the situation. Exactly what are you dealing with? There is a level of maturity. The motives are right. It is for the organization's good more than the leader's good. So there is a clear understanding of what the situation is. The second point is your own confidence as a leader. Because if you are not perceived as a confident leader, people have very little confidence in following your instructions. So you need to be somebody who looks as if you're on top of things. Now, as much as we are humans as leaders, and of course we can have our own doubts, this is not the place where we want to encourage vulnerability. This is not the place where I want to have my emotions up my sleeve and say, you know what, even I don't know what I'm doing, but my intent is good, so let's just go with that. Very unlikely that people will be able to appreciate that when you as a leader are showing lack of confidence, especially given that this is probably not the right time, which means people are not prepped up for a change just as yet. The third thing that you need to look at is your own level of decisiveness. How clear are you about the next step forward? Is it like a wishy-washy decision that you're making, or have you thought through it? And are you able to show people your entire thought process of how you're arriving at the decisions that you're sharing with them? So let me highlight here, you might not have the liberty of time to really put those decisions on the table for a discussion in this particular scenario. You're probably just spelling out the decisions that you've made. But it's important, in fact, imperative, that people in your team are able to see the process behind this decision making and not just a decision thrown at them to be followed. The fourth thing is to bring out your own experience. And if you think you don't have enough, you're able to be confident and courageous enough and humble enough to say that I've reached out to people who have better experience than I do. They have better knowledge than I do in such situations. And we are taking a balanced view basis which we are going ahead with this change. Or we are taking this particular action which seems to be right basis the experience that I've gathered from a lot of experts who've dealt with it firsthand, right? And so you might not have your own set of experiences to support every situation that you're dealing with. For example, a pandemic like this, right? Nobody who's even been in business for like 50 years or has been a senior management for 25 years has known how to deal with a situation such as this. We've dealt with financial crisis before, we've dealt with economic crisis, but the whole world coming to a standstill with the level of uncertainty that we're dealing with, not knowing when is this going to end, not knowing can we ever plan a travel again, what are the do's and don'ts, and how do I know that I'm really following all those do's and don'ts as much as people are shouting the list out, standing at the rooftop. The fact is that, I mean, I have a positive case in my house after knowing all the do's and don'ts, and I'm sure many of you are dealing with it as well. So knowing is not enough, and sometimes that knowing is not even supported by any first-hand experience. But what helps is when you are able to bring in the humbleness to go beyond your own limited experience and gather experiences from other people who've probably dealt with similar situations. And the last thing is intuition, your own ability to understand the intangibles, your own ability to sense the morale, the spirit of the organization. Are they already unstable? Are they already unsure of what's happening? Is there a sense of insecurity in the team? If I'm not aware of that and I come up with a great strategy of maybe shutting down this business, knowing that it's not serving people anymore, we are in the online environment and my offline work is probably not going to take off anytime soon. So as a leader, I have the vision. As a leader, I have the courage to start from the scratch, and I'm quite an orator. I can really speak to people and motivate them and tell them the direction that we are headed towards. But with all this as a big tick in the box, if I haven't ticked that box which refers to their morale, where are they with their emotions? Where are they with the environment, the conditions that are outside of your control? If that has not been ticked, then any other box that you're ticking will do no good, because people are not ready. They're not in that space just yet to be able to appreciate any change that you're introducing. So when we talk about managing resistance, which could be a function of taking a right action at a wrong time, we need to know that we can deal with this resistance if we understand the situation really well. We are, as leaders, are confident about what we're doing. There is a decision making process that we have followed and we are able to share with transparency. We're able to bring in experiences and not just my own experience. And we have been able to work upon our power of intuition. We're able to feel and sense the air, the space, the energy that my team breathes and lives through. So I'll take a pause here and go back to the room to see what's going on there. What's really opening up? Are you able to go back to some situation in your life where you had a great intent, a great idea, and you wondered why people are not supporting? You wondered why people are not able to see what you want to show and what you can see. So you could unmute and share, or have some comments in the chat room. I would love to know, how is this getting connected in your own space for you?
Hello.
Yeah, yes, Kailash.
Yeah, so this quite relates to my organization, wherein in the pandemic situation, see, we are into an on-premises IT solutions business,
Hmm.
and due to pandemic, all this online thing, on premises is not possible. So we try to transform. We're trying to transform our business to cloud solutions, and which can very well be done by sitting remotely and managing that remotely. So a decision is being taken by us as an organization that this is a transformation that our organization should do. But what if the team does not respond positively to this this decision? So will it be called a right decision at right time or not?
So when we talk about timing, Kailash, it might not be timing from the industry or market perspective, right? So timing could also be in the context of the preparation or readiness of the team. So the situation that you were sharing right now is when the team is not placed well, and hence it's a wrong time to introduce that decision or that particular action. So what do we need to do is see if we can proactively address the resistance that we might face, given that it might be an absolutely new experience for the team as well. They've not dealt with something which is not written in SOPs, right? And our SOPs were made like just few months back, and they were revised probably a few months back, if not made then. And it looked just as current as it was maybe a decade back when you were in business. But today, just in few months, the entire SOP looks different. You with me?
Yeah.
Our standard procedures have changed. We don't know what our operating procedures are right now. We're pretty much trying different things and see what works and what doesn't. uh, there are two groups that I see here, Kailash. One is working from home and the work just doesn't end, and the other is a group where people are working from home but there isn't much trust that the management has to know that they're really working. So there's too much micromanagement happening in with this group. So one is a self-motivated set of people who are working, and but they're working endlessly, tirelessly, right, at the cost of their own health and family. And the other is people who are getting lost in this space of being at home and not understanding that how to create that distinction between work and home. So are on the other side of the spectrum where they are more at home than at work.
I would like to
So
add one.
yeah, Rakesh.
So very quickly, Kailash ji, I would like to address it by saying that there is some issue in terms of the agility of the leadership also then. So what happens is perhaps the team below is unable to visualize the scenario going forward because of the pandemic. So because if the leadership team is agile, it can quickly bring turnaround scenarios. Like for example, at our organization, we did the complete recovery scenarios as U, V and L. You understand that key U being the best, V being the mid sector and L being the lowest. So this kind of scenario visualization is essential by the leadership team so that the right information flows to the team and then they are able to visualize that change is the necessity of the hour. Otherwise, it will lead to destruction of value of the business and then you cannot catch up.
And also, if I may add to this, the whole decision making process that went behind the strategy that you were spelling out, Kailash, is important to be communicated, right? So people can appreciate the reasons that we have to introduce this change or new way of doing things. You with me?
Yeah. What exactly? Why I got your point? I'm fairly convinced with what you are saying, but only one point. You see this agility part which you are saying. Obviously, when you are transforming, you have to first train the your team. So all that has been done. What I'm trying to possibly tell is that the acceptance to change is not that swift as it should happen. And so, will it be called a kind of a less preparation from the leader point of view? Not a right decision at right time? We should have waited more for this, or how it is?
Yeah, I would say prepping up the team before announcing a change is important, right? Sensing the environment and their emotional stability or lack of it is really important, so that we can kind of elevate that stability and strengthen it before we're able to gear them up for any action, aligned to the new strategy that you're spelling out. So it might be wrong timing in terms of the preparation needed, little pre-work that should go behind any strategic change. Make sense?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the mind map and see what can we do if we are making plans in the future, right? So given that whatever has happened, if I were to look at a strategy, say Kailash just shared that, I am looking at aligning my team to our new decisions and the new strategy that we have, what can I do going forward so that we don't feel this kind of resistance again, aligning it to these 5 areas that I want you to focus on. If it is about understanding, I want you to answer this question in your strategy deck. So you may want to write this down in a way that you can relate this question to your environment, right? So feel free to reword this. But the question primarily is to say, do you have a firm grasp on the situation as a leader? Are you clear about the situation at a micro and a macro level? Not just internally for the organization, but also at an industry level. So that's an important question to answer before you're going to announce any strategy going forward, which is related to your understanding. The second question is related to confidence, where I would want you to ponder if you believe in what you are doing. Do you really believe in what you are doing? Or is it an execution of an action point that top management believes in? And if they believe in it, they'll have good reasons to do that. But what is the level of confidence you have as a leader in this particular strategy? And to what extent are you confident about it yourself? The third question is related to being decisive, which is to say, can you win your people's trust? Now, trust is not made in a day, okay? It is not built in a day. It takes a long time. We've done a workshop on trust already, and a lot of you in the room have been a part of it. So it's a very, very deep topic to dive into. It will go into areas related to your character, related to being congruent, authenticity. So trust is really, really deep and foundation of any relationship, especially when it comes to leadership. But when you're making decisions, winning people's trust in this space means, are you able to show them the reason why you're making these decisions? Are you able to show them your process? What are the tools that you're using? What are the facts that you're using? What is your structure of arriving at that particular decision? So using that, do you think, are you confident that you will be able to win people's trust once you share it with them? So this is a closed door, preparation happening, by the way. So the questions that I'm opening up here for you are questions that you need to answer first, and then bring out the next strategy or change in action plan or a new right action to your team. Now, the next question is related to experience, which is to say, have you drawn upon wisdom from other people from the industry, maybe the mentors that you know, other people who you know have dealt with a similar shift or a similar change or a similar challenge? Have you been able to draw upon their wisdom? How many people have you reached out to? How much collective wisdom have you already gathered before arriving at this new strategy? Can you go deeper with that? Can you reach out to a few more people? Are these people restricted to only your organization top management, or have you been able to speak to mentors outside your organization, perhaps in the same industry, because you can leverage on their experience, the industry knowledge? So what is the experience that you've gathered, which is the basis of this strategy that you're formulating? And the last question I want you to ponder over is, have you taken into account the intangibles? Extremely, extremely important, because we're dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people, you need to know that what drives us as humans is our emotions. As much as we might want to disconnect ourselves from emotions, we are all led by how we feel more than anything else. So the way the team is feeling, what they are going through, what are the conditions in their personal space, what are the conditions in the environment, in their workspace, is very important to know. And all this is known best through intuition, which comes with experience and a deep understanding of the culture that you've been able to lead in your organization. So these are the 5 questions which can be part of your strategy making deck. Even before you arrive at your final strategy, see if you have a detailed answer to these questions, because this is what will help us to not fall in trap of the same things that have happened in the past, which created resistance. Any questions so far, or we'll move to the third scenario?
Last one, if you can give some example,
Sure.
the intuition part.
So the intuition part is the most important part, where we are saying, when you are thinking of a strategy, when you have been able to define the right action that you want to take, have you been able to understand where the team is? The what is the energy level in the organization? What is the momentum right now? Right? What is the morale of the team? Are they high on their energy? Is the morale high? Is the morale low? Do they think that we're going nowhere, or are they optimistic about plans for the future? So what are people feeling? What is the level of energy in the team right now, which is intangible? It's very difficult to really quantify that, but as a leader, the way you connected with your team and the experience that you have in that particular industry will tell you, and your gut feeling will tell you where your team is. So those intangibles like energy, like morale, like momentum, that's very, very important. And if you think that morale is not where it should be, I mean, I think people are kind of low on the morale. Someone or the other is sick in the family. They're kind of wondering and going deeper into self introspection on what does anything really mean. So work life balance has been really screwed up all this while, and now it is getting to the other extreme, where people are probably preferring to be only with family because they've realized that they've given very little time to them, so which is another extreme. And so where is the balance? Where is my team right now? Are they working like crazy because they are insecure and they think they might lose their job and they're doing more than they need to? Or are they on the other side, where they've kind of totally let go of any ambition that they had related to work, because they realize that they're losing people and all that matters to them is to just be with those people? Can we sense where they are and then bring them somewhere in between, so they feel that sense of balance for their own self? And when you create that kind of balance within the team at their own morale level, is when they are really truly ready to understand the actions and the new strategies that you are about to propose.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's reflect upon the third scenario, which is wrong action at the right time. Now, the time is right, but what you are proposing or the action that you are taking is wrong. And that happens sometimes, right? So for example, it's a right time for us to go online, and it's a right time for the education industry to go deeper into understanding the technology that exists and leveraging upon that technology to create a better reach, right? Now you could go wrong with that by not aligning your content with the target market. You could go wrong by not spending enough on the marketing piece, or not identifying the geography that will connect best with the content that you want to develop. You're not clear about what are you serving and who are you serving it to. So there is a wrong action involved, even though the time is right for you to do something on those lines. And when that happens, we make mistakes. And mistakes are bound to happen. Like how Rakesh said a while back, it's a process through which we learn. But here the question is, do we really know how to learn from mistakes? So if I were to ask you, what is your process of learning from your mistakes? What would be your answer? I would love to hear some processes, some ways, some strategies that you have in the room where you could probably, know this is how I'm going to learn from our mistakes. What's your way of dealing with that? How do you learn from your mistakes?
Yukti, at least we have a process that any project that we execute, at the end of the project or at a fortnightly or weekly, we collect feedback from the team, which basically are the best practices or learning from what we did wrong in one project becomes your Bible for executing your next project, so that you don't do the same mistake again. One. Second is from the experience of the people that are there in the projects. So might not be that a mistake would have done in your organization, but people have done that in their past organization. So proactively you avoid making those mistakes again. One is learning from others' mistakes, from your past experience, and also something would be, as the world is dynamic, situation or the circumstances might be totally new for the first time. There you cannot avoid, you have to play with the best of your abilities, and still you make a mistakes and things might go wrong, but that becomes your learning curve so that you don't repeat that next time.
Right. So you kind of draw a learning curve, you create a feedback mechanism within the team, and you learn from others' mistakes. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. That sounds very sensible and an obvious thing to do when you want to learn from your mistakes. Is there any other take that anyone might have in the room on how do you learn from your mistakes? I'll pick up on some of the comments I see in the
I
chat
think
box.
I would like to contribute here, Yukti.
Yeah, sure, Rakesh.
See, so at an organizational level, whatever Mr. Anil Agrawal said, I completely agree with you. But there is another level as well. So there is a interconnect with your personal self. Ki how are you learning from your mistakes, and then how you are transforming that, communicating that at the leadership level so that such mistakes are avoided. So I keep on reflecting on that angle as well, that if I have committed a mistake, first of all, it should appear a mistake in my own perspective, in my own eyes. Then only I consider that as a mistake. And then I reflect upon it, that why did I commit it and how did I go wrong and how it could have affected my own brand name, like, or the company's brand name. So that is another level of visualization, which I generally take and then learn from that as well.
Okay, so I hear self introspection and then being able to communicate that to the team honestly, so that you can openly share where you went wrong and what are the learnings from there that we should not repeat or look at more carefully going forward.
Yeah.
I
Wonderful.
would like to add something here, Yukti, if I may.
Sure, sure, Jyoti.
I think for me to actually identify and learn from my mistakes is by taking a good feedback from my team. And to an extent, because of this pandemic issue and people are working from home, we have also done a people survey so that we are guided by the people in terms of, from the organizational point of view, what are the policies that we should involve and improve specifically during this period of time. And at the individual level, we've got our team giving us a feedback. So I think that goes a long way, wherein because you wouldn't really identify certain mistakes where you're maybe just functioning at the subconscious level. So when the team, that kind of a spirit is required between your team and you, the comfort level, the trust aspect has to be there, where they are also comfortable to give you that feedback, and then you learn from that mistake. So that's for me.
Absolutely. So you're
I have
saying it
I
was
have
saying,
one take on this. So while all these points are absolutely correct, feedback or understanding, I think the first is what's your criteria of measurement also? What do you define as a mistake? So it's subjective in relation to something you feel which is right or what is correct. So what is that deviation or the tolerance? Is it within your risk tolerance, what we call it? If that's fine, I think again there's a lot of confusion because people really don't know what's right or what's correct, and they feel everything is a mistake. Obviously, there are chances of always improving at all points of time, so you could keep on committing mistakes. So again, that's where your session on forgiving yourself for what you've done, so, and your improving comes in. But I would also put it on criteria for measurement also.
right. But so, so to simplify, let's say that what we are considering as a mistake in this particular discussion is if the outcomes are not met with,
Yeah,
right? So we decided that this is what we should be doing and we're not able to achieve that. And in the process, we've done something that we shouldn't have or we could have done better.
and so once it's very set and it's known, then yes, the feedback, the understanding of the problem, I think everything is right.
Absolutely. I would agree as well. But let us just go a little deeper. I see a few questions here in the chat box. I would love to take them up at the end of this session. So we'll have a quick Q&A because it needs to be addressed in a different way on trust. Dhananjay, please share it with us after the session. And I would also like to address Sumedha in a bit if you could share your comment later. But for now, let us just go deeper into learning from mistakes and see if there is a better way for us to create a certain process around this entire intent to learn from mistakes. Now, here I am not taking away the efforts that you guys are already making because it makes a lot of sense. Taking feedback from the team, creating a proactive process where there is a two-way communication at all times and not you're not waiting for a disaster to hit you or a crisis to happen for you to really start those conversations. Great going there. Also, self introspection I think is very good for you to see as a leader where are you going wrong, what are your own bottlenecks, and then sharing it with the team with your action plan behind it. Of course, you would not just go to them and say, you know what, I think I really suck at this and this is something that I'm not so good at. You would also want to back that up by saying, this is the plan that I have signed up for, this is what I am doing to bring myself up, or like kind of ensure that I'm able to learn what I need to learn on this particular aspect of leadership or work. So you go to the team sharing what you're realizing, the mistakes that you're making, but you also go with a plan of action so that they are able to feel that confidence they must feel in you as a leader. So with all that done, I want to encourage you to think of a situation, maybe the recent most that comes to your mind, where a particular strategy went wrong, right? You thought that this was a great idea, you implemented that project or you implemented that particular idea, but it just went south. Now, what happened? I mean, you knew that the timing was right. You knew that this is going to make a lot of sense. This will add to the revenue, or this will help us on some other KPI, which is important for us in the organization. But it didn't really go in the same direction as you had imagined. So, see if you can go back to a scenario such as this and write that in your notebook right now. If you're watching this video later, then just pause it here and go back to that situation before we dive into ways of learning from such mistakes. If you're done recollecting one such situation, then just say done in the chat box, and I know we're ready to go deeper into what we can do. Yes, Shailesh, you need to analyze what mistake happened, right? Of what was the mistake and under what circumstances. That's the analysis I'm encouraging you to do right now. If you could just think of something where, you know, the initiative was great, the thought was great, the intent was great, but it just didn't see the light of the day. All right, with that done, let us see if these questions will help us to learn and ensure that we're able to launch our initiatives in a better way going forward. So please don't write any of this before you're able to absorb it and take it into your own space. So stick to the situation that you are visualizing in your mind and see if you can answer these questions. So the first question, and what are we doing in this exercise, by the way, once again, is trying to identify what is there to learn. So let me close this here and say, if I were to throw this question to a huge audience, on what is their process to learn from mistakes, more often than not, what I get as a response is, I answer two questions: what went well and what can be better, which I think is great. I mean, after every session, I answer those two questions as well for myself: what went well and what could be better. And that just keeps improving your game, right? But sometimes you need to go deeper, and especially when the mistake happens at a strategy level, which means a particular relevant project that should have taken off and didn't, a particular strategy that could have added to the revenue but just couldn't for whatever reason, and you're wondering what mistake happened. This is when it needs to go beyond self introspection. This is when it needs to go beyond just the feedback. What we are doing in this exercise is introspecting in a very guided fashion, where we are trying to align the self reflection on the strategy piece. What made us think about that initiative? What is our thought process? What is our decision making process? What is our strategic process behind what we do and how we lead? With that context established, let us see what these questions will open up for you. So the first question that I want you to answer for this particular situation you have in mind right now is, what was the goal of the initiative? You can take a minute to quickly write it down. If you have the situation clear in your mind, what was the goal? We are learning from that particular mistake together in this moment right now. Okay, so that's the question we will start with. What was my goal for that particular initiative? What was I trying to achieve? With that done, let's move to the next question to see, who was the individual responsible for leading it? Was it me? Was it my top management, my boss, or his or her super boss? Who were the people? Was it a global team, a global office, right? Within geographies, I mean, you had to go beyond geographies and it wasn't a local decision. Who were the people responsible for leading it? I'm not saying this is an opportunity for us to shrug off the responsibility and say it wasn't me, but let us acknowledge that I was not the sole decision maker, perhaps, in this particular situation. Maybe it had to be bounced off with some, larger team, bigger team, more senior people, and they were actually holding the fort. And I of course am responsible for what happened, but they were responsible for leading that particular initiative. And if it is you, then it is you. So that's what I would want you to write. The third question is, what are the factors that you considered when you were planning the strategy? What all factors were considered by you when you were planning this? So did you consider the market environment? Did you consider the people? Did you consider the revenue line? Were you looking at the bottom line or the top line? Were you looking at expansion or sustenance? What were you looking at? Were you looking at amalgamation, or were you looking at collaboration? What were the different factors that went behind planning this strategy? The fourth question is, whose experience did the strategy draw upon? And when I talk about experience here, I'm talking about your first hand experience. Have you dealt with this before? Have you launched this project before? Have you ever launched this initiative before? Or did you leverage upon collective wisdom that you gathered from elsewhere, which is also fine. But this is where I would want you to write down, was it your own experience or lack of it? Or was it a collective wisdom that you gathered? And if yes, then who were these people you gathered it from? Do you want to look at that area of your decision making process? What kind of people did I go back to? Were these mentors I honestly and genuinely respect, but they are not industry experts? Or were these industry experts, but not so well versed with the changing environment and the dynamic environment, and they are still Stone Age or old school in the way they are functioning? Who were these people I reached out to for their experience, if at all? Or was it just my limited experience which laid the foundation of this particular strategy? The next question to look at is, what was organization's condition at the time of launch? Where was the organization that time? Were we barely surviving or were we flourishing? Was it one of those good times that we were enjoying together? Or were we already in doldrums going absolutely south? And that's when I decided on introducing this strategy. What was the condition of your organization at that time? And the next question is to explore the industry condition. So, what were the market or industry conditions that time? So, for example, as a travel agency, I could be doing real bad in my business, and that could be a function of some strategies which are totally falling off the table, and I probably don't have right people at the right positions in my organization, so we're not taking the right calls. But the industry is flourishing. Or it could be a situation where we are living through the times such as these, where travel has come to a standstill, the entire sector is pretty much dormant, and we're all just trying to survive. What is the condition that prevailed in the industry, in the market, when you launched that particular strategy or initiative? The next question is, what factors were clearly working against it? You knew, even when you had that thought, you put it on paper, you knew that these are the things that are going to go against my initiative, my plan, my project, my strategy. Okay, this could be the hindrance, this could be a possible roadblock. If you don't have a list such as that ready, then you haven't worked enough on the strategy piece anyway. Once again, let me clarify that what I mean by strategy over here is a decision that you needed to make. So please don't go back to excusing yourself from this discussion or exercise thinking that you don't plan strategies for your organization. For as long as you sit on a chair that is looked up to for the role that you play as a leader, there is strategy involved in the way you function. So let's connect it to that strategy and see if I knew at that point in time that this particular decision will have certain repercussions. What is going to work against this project, this plan? The next question is, could it have been more successful if this was launched a little earlier or a little later? Could it be a function of time? Is it little after people have already kind of gotten used to it and rejected this particular thought, or is it way too early and people haven't yet understood? So if you read this book called Originals, there are so many stories that Adam Grant shares where he totally kind of let's go of let's totally let go of the fact that we need to be the first in whatever we think of or whatever we want to achieve. Okay, this whole first movers advantage is overhyped, and sometimes it's not needed to be successful, because sometimes the first movers come up with great ideas a little before time. So this is another great situation where you're doing the right thing at the wrong time. The market is not ready to accept and welcome the idea just yet. And when the market starts getting used to it, somebody else comes, learns from your mistake, and does a better job at executing the same. So people who've are named as unicorn, or people who've really been successful in their careers, are not necessarily the first movers. They are people who have very consciously, carefully observed the readiness of the market and have very carefully and consciously learned from the competition and their mistakes to prepare their game and action plan and enter the market at the right time with the right action. So, could your initiative fall prey to the timing of the launch? Is that a possibility? It's a question that I want you to mull over for this particular strategy or initiative that you have in your mind. And the last question is, why did the initiative ultimately fail? What do you think? Why do you think it failed? What were the reasons for it to not work in your favor? When we are learning from a mistake, which is a mistake related to a particular strategy or a project that should have taken off, which affects more lives than one, which affects the organization directly, is when we need to go beyond just the feedback, just the self introspection of what I can do better, and go deeper into the issue itself. When you do this, I strongly recommend that you do it as an observer in a detached manner, when you're not intellectually or emotionally attaching yourself with the results. Now, obviously, we know that it's a mistake, which means it didn't go well, right? So the result is clear, right? We're not A plus here, but that's all right. Can we disconnect emotionally and look at this as a fly on the wall and see if these are the questions that I have to answer, what would be my answer to these questions? And that's how we can learn from such mistakes where our actions go wrong even when the time is right. So let me take a pause here and check with you all here in the room what's going on there. Which part of your experience are you going back to? And how do you think this exercise can be useful for you going forward?
Hi, Yukti, Praveen here.
Hi, Praveen.
I was looking at this question, which is very important amongst the all, while all are important, what you have rightly pointed out. But a lot of times it happens that we go with one person saying yes and no, and then just going with it. So your fourth question, whose experience did the strategy draw upon? I feel it makes a big difference. While he or she might have had considered all the factors, the timing, the circumstances, the industry operative factors and all. But if his experience probably go wrong, then whole project goes for a toss. I'm not saying he's solely responsible, but he carries a lot of weight in driving the decision or the project. And if one decision going wrong way jeopardizes the whole project and the success to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out, Praveen. That's the key, like you rightly said. And honesty is the only way for us to address a question such as that, right? In fact, more often than not, people realize in this question that they were over confident about their limited experience, right? They didn't probably even bother to reach out to people from the industry to get some advice before they could go ahead with the plan. So that happens as well. For as long as you're ready for an exercise such as this, it's not easy to go deeper and introspect. All right, let's move to the fourth scenario very quickly, which is a win-win situation. It is the place to be for all of us. That's where we want to be all the time. When the action is right and the time is right is when you achieve success, right? There is nothing that stops you. You've just kind of hit the bullseye. But there is a way in which you prepare yourself to hit the bullseye. It doesn't just happen. In fact, if it has happened by fluke, it's even more dangerous because you don't know what you did right. Knowing the whole process is a lot more important than just achieving success at the end of it. So here I want to very quickly mention four ways in which we can elevate our level of judgment, because success is a function of making good judgments as a leader. And there is a reason why I have not put it in the mind map. I want you to consciously dive into this particular piece on achieving success through good decisions by listening to me, because the first trait of a leader to shape up the ability to take good judgments, good calls, good decisions is their ability to listen. Active listening is the first trait to develop when you want to shape your ability to make good decisions. And by active listening, I don't mean just Fiji. If you attended my sessions before, you know that I always advocate a four-step process for developing active listening, which is FIJI Fiji. But I am talking about a third level listening here. Third level listening is when you are able to listen to what is not even being said. when you're able to see somebody's body language, understand the body language, and listen attentively, and at the same time read critically, or listen to people critically. So when you're talking about critical listening, it's not about funneling it through your judgments or your fixed beliefs or limited beliefs. It's about questioning the assumptions that are underlaying in their particular in this particular situation for their opinions or comments, right? All of us operate from certain fixed mindsets, and a lot of assumptions sometimes we're absolutely unaware of as well. So when you are listening to people, don't just listen to them at a face value. Don't just pick whatever is being presented to you, but see if you can go deeper and listen to things which are not said. Can you bring in an element of being a critical thinker that we've talked about in our online course in Upskilling Leadership Blueprint? What does it mean to be a critical thinker? Right, so we've used a tool over there to sharpen our ability to be a critical thinker. Can we bring in that element in listening? So here are the ways in which I want you to consciously improve your listening ability, and this can come really handy for you. The first is to be aware of your own filters. Be aware. Self-awareness is the key to be a better listener, right? How aware are you of the way you think, the way you listen to people? Are you already always listening, as they say sometimes, that you already know what's being said because you're operating from your own filters? Or are you listening as if you've no idea what the other person is going to say? There is no filter there, there is no judgment there. You're truly listening as if somebody's operating from a clean slate. So that's the first thing to do. The second thing is to realize when you're losing patience, because we have very limited attention span, right? So we could be losing patience, and that's perfectly fine. That's when we need to indulge in a little dialogue, ask questions, right? Get into some kind of a discussion so that you're able to bring your focus back into listening. And the third thing that I want you to focus on is to expand the sources from where you're gathering this information. When you're listening to one person, don't base your calls, your judgments, your decisions on just that. Go beyond, create your own information web. Go beyond the low hanging sources of information and see if you can go consciously one step forward and gather some more information from other sources. So that's the first skill to develop. But the second skill to develop for good judgments is trust. We've talked a lot about trust in a session called Building Trust earlier. So you can go onto my YouTube channel and go through that webinar if you're keen to learn more about it. But trust is the most important thing, which is when you realize that what you need to do is seek diversity and not just validation. Trust is not limited to people who you like because they're always in support of what you say, but trust is developed when you know that people have the courage and comfort to say what needs to be said, even though you might not like it. Right? The naysayers, so to say, people who will go against your point of view, people who dare to question you, people who dare to tell you what you don't want to hear, are the people you need to have around you. And that is the level of trust you need to establish as a leader so that you can hone the ability to make good judgments, good calls, good decisions. So what I want you to look at here is if you can cultivate sources of trusted advice, if you can cultivate the relationships in your life where you are allowing people who you know will somehow, for some reason, will always go against your point of view. Are you comfortable to allow them in? Are they part of your inner circle? Are you able to accept their presence? And are you comfortable with that? Will you allow people to be a devil's advocate if need be? And the third thing that I want you to look at is experience. Now, experience is not just your own experience, which makes you relevant. It is also the experience that you can gather from people when you drop the need to be needed, when you drop the need to be the most wise and learned person on the floor. When you open yourself up to the fact that no matter how much I know, I always know little, is when you are totally expanding the experience that you can have in a very short span of time. In fact, if you want to expedite that process, consciously go beyond geographies. Consciously create an environment where you shuffle the HODs, right? So ops head is becoming sales head, and sales head will go and be ops head, and see how well sales and operations will start dealing with each other when their management gets swapped. Because suddenly there is another level of empathy. Suddenly the understanding and the respect for the other department and the work that they do is at another level. So if as an organization we build that nerve to swap people at management level, is when we are actually taking a serious step forward towards developing empathy. Otherwise it is just one of those nice things to hang around with, that we are very empathetic organization. What is the action that you're taking? Do you have the nerve to swap the HODs? Because ultimately work is done by the junior staff, but HOD is a leader who can guide them. That guidance is not a function of technical expertise. We know that. There is a Harvard study there to prove that more than 80% of our success from mid management and beyond is basis our people skills and not a technical know-how, right? So 15% is our technical ability and 85% is our ability to deal with people. So if that is what results in success, then how about swapping these managers or these leaders to see what can they bring in, what freshness can they bring in into this new department, and that will be a real test of empathy. So that's what I want to conclude this session with. I want to open the house for questions. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Very quick recap. We talked about 4 aspects of timing your leadership. Wrong action at a wrong time can lead to a disaster. Right action at a wrong time can lead to resistance. Wrong action at a right time could be a mistake. We need to know how to learn from those mistakes. So this little exercise we did. And right action at the right time is what results in success that we all aim at. So very quickly, what are we taking away from this session? And if you have any questions, I'll be absolutely happy to answer. Thank you, Anil. I'm glad you found the session to be useful and wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions, or if you share your take.
Can you hear me? Hello, Yukti, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, Abhishek.
This wonderful gives a kind of insight. One question I've actually posted on the chat as well is there could be a scenario that one failure experience, and you try in one situation and you try it in another one again out of your intuition or gut feeling, and it works. So how do you judge this, whether this experience, this action was a failure or a successful?
So if I heard your question, well, what you're saying is you took one action which looked like a mistake the first time, and then you took the same action later, and that turned out to be right. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So the question is, how do I know whether the action in itself was right or not? Is that right?
Yeah, you got it right. Yeah.
Okay. So now here is the answer to this, and that actually encompasses any decision or the repercussions that we might have from it. No standalone decision can be claimed as a right or a wrong decision. The right or the wrong aspect of it is actually the function of the result that we see after taking that particular decision, and that result is again a function of a lot of different things within the organization. This time, maybe the level of trust that you enjoy with them is much deeper this time. You with me? So there could be a lot of functions just outside the intellectual premise of that particular decision, which could lead to another result, a different result. Can you hear me, Abhishek?
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that question. I'll take up another question here that I read a while back saying, how can we understand that we have won our team's trust? This was asked by Dhananjay. If you're there, Dhananjay, thank you for this question. I would like to take this up, and of course, we went deeper into this with our session on trust, on building trust. But very quickly, the answer to this question would be to see the openness with which people come to you with bad news, right? The openness with which people tell you the mistakes before you find them out. How often are you finding out mistakes and dealing with them, and how often are you being informed about it before you had to deal with them? What is the comfort level that your team has with you to be able to tell you when things are not okay? What is the extent to which they feel compelled to tell you all is well, even when it isn't, is a sign of their trust in you, right? So more often than not, we have this fear that holds us back to really say the way things are. Because as junior staff, as people who are, not at a strategy level, we are so hands on with the real situation that sometimes the reality gets too difficult to accept, leave alone share with top management. It just looks as if it's a failure at your end. So you want to cover it as much as you can. And that's the real test of leadership. So if your team feels no need to cover it, and the first thing they want to do is to let you know what the situation is, what the reality is, and then of course share their own action plan that they have to fix the issue, and or being open to your suggestions to fix it, is a sign of their trust in you. That's the way you measure your team's trust in you. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Dhananjay.
Yes, thanks for sharing your this one. But one thing I would like to this one share that
Yes, please.
Yeah, can I?
I lost the, yeah.
Yeah, Yukti. So,
Yes, go ahead.
so I will relate, the entire, session that you had. It is very relevant because I will just tell a small experience, and that was on the mental health startup. So that was me and my friend that initiated about 2 years ago. That time, a lot of suicides were happening because these engineering students were committing suicides, and so we thought of launching this mental health, startup. But we, in the process of launching it soon, we did not have enough therapists and the psychologist, and so it did not click very well that time, because though we were getting response, but not enough psychologists were available on our panel. Now in the pandemic situations, when we relaunch this with learning from that mistake, wherein the entire mental health issue is taken off very very rapidly. Before this, we actually learned from our mistake and put our psychologist and therapist in order. And the same startup which failed 2 years ago is now picking up. So just wanted to correlate with whatever you have given us today. Thank you.
You've absolutely pinned it down. Thank you for sharing that, Kailash. Thank you so much. I would like to conclude the session now. If you still have any questions or you want to share your takeaways, feel free to write to me on Yukti at sbyacademy.in. And I would love to know how you're using this session to grow even further. So I wish and pray that we go beyond luck and factors within or outside our control, and see if we can bring in good judgment that can stack the cards in our favor even when everything else goes south. So thank you again for your patient listening and active participation. I will see you next week with another insight on leadership. Thanks so much. Have a lovely week ahead.
Thanks, bye. Take care.
Bye.